And I've been involved in the TaskWarrior project since I think 2009, or in the whole project, the Gothenburg Bit Factory. Yeah, and well, from apart from Time Warrior, I also manage the Holy Data project, and I'm also administrating a bit the web pages for the projects here. So that's, I guess, all from my side.
You're muted.
For me, I would say that I'm a lover of TaskWarrior. I've used it for about 3 years now, and it just at first it took me a little bit of time to get used to and I'm still learning a lot of stuff, but it really is a good system and I really like the upgrade to the Task Champion, the backend, the SQL storage. So I was looking around online and I happened to spot this meeting, decided to crash the party.
Welcome.
So I appreciate y'all with all the work you guys do. Thank you.
Yeah, I suppose that keeping in the theme with crashing the party, here I am. My name is Matt Smita. I've been using TaskWarrior on and off for a number of years now, just as a regular user, and I just recently started using Time Warrior as I advance in my burgeoning skill now of software engineering. So I just worked on one of the pull requests for TaskWarrior, where I was renaming test files according to their file type, and I got a little bit of help from Felix and Rin on that. So thanks for that, Rin. And I did just start using Time Warrior a few weeks ago as well, so I've been enjoying that too. Still learning more and more about both of these tools. So anyway, happy to join Ed in crashing the party here.
Yeah, so I've been using Warrior for quite a while, but only recently started doing development on it. I'll talk a little bit more about that history now, but yeah, have sort of unofficially taken over maintainership of the project, I guess. No one seemed to object, and Tomas I've talked to Tomas, who's nominally the maintainer, and he seems okay with everything. So, but yeah, I use TaskWarrior both for work and for personal stuff, and have been for quite a while, and just really like the model, and really wanted to fix some of the bugs I found with it. So that's why I'm here.
It is Ryan. Is my audio working? Okay. Yeah, don't do this a lot, so not very good at setting up the audio. I'd never heard of Google Meet, but this is great. This is the first thing I've ever used that just worked out of the box without like really messing with my system. But yeah, I got involved in Bug Warrior a long time ago when I was freelancing. Like I think a lot of people who are drawn to Bug Warrior who have a lot of different issues, a lot of different projects, and I think a lot of people are drawn into TaskWarrior that way. And I see a lot of people coming from that direction. Got involved there on accident by like a lot of you just trying to fix the bugs. And about a year and a half ago, I finally decided I give up on TaskWarrior. This is not fixable. I'm just going to start my own tool from scratch. But Dustin told me about this Task Champion thing he's working on. And I got to see if I can use that maybe as a back end to my tool, because this JSON database just isn't working out for me. I mean, there's no way to implement the features I want. It's just not performant. I can't do it. And I went to the Task Champion repo, and lo and behold, there was activity a couple months ago, and the repository was archived. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. You guys were working on this, and you just gave up? Like, so hard that I can't even comment on the issue. So I stalked Dustin on GitHub, was looking at task cluster. I was like, this isn't it. What is he doing? Finally came across his activity on TaskWarrior. And that's kind of been my agenda has been over the last year and a half, kind of encouraging him to complete that integration And for me, it was a lot less work to, I guess, encourage him to complete that than to start my own tool. So that's kind of been my agenda.
I also don't have a long speech, but I can kind of give the history of how we got where we got, because I think it informs a little bit of why 3.0 turned out the way it did. So probably like 5 years ago, I do a lot of syncing between different replicas, and sync breaks a lot, and the task D breaks a lot. So I was a little frustrated with that, and then I took over freesync.com, which was one of the 2 free sync choices out there, because the existing maintainer put a little banner on it that said he was looking for someone to run it. Sure, that sounds easy. And it crashed a lot there, so I had periodic restarts of the thing. But also, I was kind of horrified to see that I could see everyone's task data. I think I knew that in my head, but now that I had other users using my software, and I was like, no, I don't want to see that task. Like being an email maintainer in the 90s, you can see their stuff you really shouldn't. Eventually shut that down. I guess that comes a little bit later. But during the pandemic, I was kind of bored, wanted to build something based on operational transforms, which is just a way of synchronizing multiple documents. So I think, at least for a long time, Google Docs used this to let you kind of 2 different people edit. It finds a way to put those edits together and sort of come up with a shared document that both of you have changed, even if there's some sort of, you're offline for a little bit, which turns out exactly what TaskWarrior is. So I started with that core, like, let's figure out how OT works, how to test it, how to build it, where it can go wrong, read a bunch of papers. And it was just a hobby project, right? I was bored, I was at home a lot. When I wanted to play with something real in Rust. And I thought, wait a minute, you could build a task tracking app around this. And I looked at TaskWarrior for a while to see if I could integrate it with TaskWarrior, and that just seemed really hard because I hadn't done C++ in 20 years. So I was like, I'll just write a thing on the side. It'll never come to anything. Maybe I'll use it personally. We'll see. And then Ben and Andrew, DBR and Savchenko, I started the Task Champion repo, and they kind of, I don't remember exactly how we got introduced, but they were like, this is great. We want to work on this. So kind of got together to make some more things out of it. Ben did a lot of the programming. Andrew did a lot of the organization and graphics, stuff like that. And it started to look like we were actually going to be maybe forking TaskWarrior. And I thought pretty hard about whether it made sense to try to build something inspired by TaskWarrior, but hopefully better, because reproducing the command line interface enough that it would still work in people's scripts was pretty impossible. And we were working in that direction for a while. And then I talked to Tomas Labe, who's the maintainer of TaskWarrior. And he kind of, we talked about, like, does a fork make sense, or does trying to get this into TaskWarrior make sense? And I was kind of leaning toward the fork, just in the context of, like, I don't want to break TaskWarrior if I can help it, but also splitting that community sounds bad. So he convinced me to actually do it in place, because we want to keep this TaskWarrior community and, like, keep TaskWarrior moving forward versus letting it kind of wilt on the vine and continuing with something else and making everyone transition to that. So that's kind of why we started putting them together. So that led to a whole bunch of explorations of how to put Rust stuff together with with C++ because we'd already written quite a bit of Rust, and we had this big C++ code base. So that took quite a while. And it was really mostly me. There's certainly some people, Ryan was one of them, who did quite a bit of development work on that project. But we ended up cutting a lot of corners that maybe I wouldn't in my full-time job because it was just me. And I needed to get something out and be done with this sort of multi-year trajectory to getting something shipped. So when we released 3.0, there were a lot of intentional decisions, one of which was to have this export and import process for upgrading, where the alternative would have been some engineering work to keep the existing stuff that could read the old database and have some kind of upgrade command that would read that and write it to the Rust format. That would have been some amount of work. I'm not saying it'd be another year of work, but we chose not to do that. And that has led to a lot of consternation among users who are surprised by this upgrade. So that was unfortunate, but that was a decision we made and wasn't just an accident. That's kind of the history of it. So nominally, I'm kind of the maintainer right now. I'm the one that's on the repo most of the time, clicking merge, making decisions. But Tomas is still, I think, officially the maintainer. He's very busy. He is CTO of a company I don't remember the name of, and I assume very busy with that project. So we don't see a whole lot from him. But there's still a lot of TaskWarrior I don't know. I don't use hooks. I don't really know what the Gutenberg bit factory is. Maybe Tomas can fill me in on that. There's some permissions I still don't have. I think I'm admin on the repo, but not the organization. So we're sort of in an in-between state in terms of maintainership, but at the moment, I think I have enough autonomy to do the things we need to do. I don't have anything else to say, but I'm happy to talk about things that other people want me to talk about from there. There's two big things that I want to work on. One of them is kind of an internal thing, which is the interface between Rust, the Task Champion, and TaskWarrior. Right now, that was done in a way where I didn't really know what I was doing, and it was hacking the way to get it done, and it's super complicated. There's like 2 layers of wrappers, which doesn't make sense when you're only wrapping one thing into another. And that's the FFI, the foreign function interface. There are simpler ways to do that, and I'd like to do those more simply, not only to simplify the code, but because I would like other applications, such as BugWarrior, to be able to embed Task Champion and not have to interface with TaskWarrior. So TaskWarrior is sort of a client of Task Champion, and so is BugWarrior, and so is in the AM or freesync.com or something like that. They're just using the kind of data storage core. So I need to come up with a simpler story for that. And the other thing is more sync options. So right now we use Google Cloud, and there's an option to talk to the sync server. And the sync server is kind of just a reference implementation, I would probably describe it as. So it's hard to deploy, doesn't do any user authentication. Like it's missing some major features that you'd want for a real piece of software. Those just need to be added. It's not designed to not have them, they're just not there. So finishing up that whole world of sync so that we can talk to more cloud backends or other backends that people are interested in using and give them more options would be great. I guess I should say I work at Google. I did not pick Google Cloud because I worked at Google. This is another thing that might be easy to misinterpret. It's actually much harder to do this sync to Amazon, which is kind of my first choice for cloud stuff, just because I know it best. Yeah. It's much harder to do it for Amazon, so I did it for Google Cloud because it's the one I know second best. And Azure would have been the third choice, and I know Azure very, very lightly. So that's why that decision was made. There's no real technical reason that we can't sync to all of the clouds or to a number of other kind of cloud storage systems. Any other question? Did I answer that question? Okay. I guess I should say I want to reinvigorate. If you look at the taskwarrior.org page, there's like 100, I don't know, there's a lot of projects that interface with TaskWarrior. And I think a lot of them kind of slowed down and stopped because TaskWarrior slowed down and stopped. It'd be nice to, over the long term, over a couple of years, get that back up and going so that there's people working on stuff in TaskWarrior, and that kind of encourages the core TaskWarrior devs and the Task Champion development to continue because this feature is needed for this cool new project. I think once an ecosystem kind of develops of people working together, then you get a lot of cross-pollination, and someone stops working on their iOS app, and then someone else is like, oh, I know iOS, I'll go help with that. I'd like to get to that point where we can all feel a little more relaxed because there's other people that can get the work done. Hello, Felix. You're muted. I think you're auto-muted when you join at this point.
Sorry, I just said I'm also outside, currently visiting Lofoten, so I might drop out in a few minutes again, but I wanted to shortly join in.
Oh, great. Lofoten, I'm jealous. We're in the Q&A section. Felix has also been working on tests quite a bit. Anything else you want to say to introduce yourself before we go on?
Yeah, maybe I started TaskWarrior, I think, using like 2 or 3 years ago, and I wanted also at this time, I think, to contribute, but I didn't know what to do in CMake or these stuff. But now I work with like a lot of research stuff, and therefore I read for myself also what maybe like the build system mainly. So I think then I also now notice like, oh yeah, I mean, one could maybe do some small stuff to improve something, and then I think that's mainly why I then contributed also lately. And yeah, that's
great. I appreciate it.
Stuff.
That's probably a pretty long list. I have of the set of things. No, unfortunately not. It's in a Google Doc actually. I think there's a lot of things to figure out, and I suggested on the discussion thread that maybe we should all like have a list of things we want to talk about, and I do, and it's full page, so we're not going to do it today. But let me see if I could pull out just some to name some things that I think need to get done here. One of them is actually thinking about packaging and the downstream repos. I worked on BuildBot long ago, which is it's a CI system, and it was packaged in Ubuntu and packaged in Red Hat and CentOS and Fedora and all of those things. And we knew the person that did the packaging in each of those. We just sent an email to them. We weren't best friends, but they knew when they saw that there was a new release to BuildBot. If something was weird with the packaging, they had a person or a way to contact us and get in touch, and so it had a pre-existing relationship there. And I think that might have helped with the Arch and Homebrew issues that we had, where if there had been a maintainer there that knew that the TaskWarrior community was active and there's these people that'll answer your questions quickly, they might have come back and said, hey, I see this is a 3.0. Is there something I should make sure my users know? And we could have said, yes, they're going to need to export and then re-import, so maybe don't ship that today. And maybe we would have even said, okay, let's hold off. We'll do this extra automatic upgrade in 3.1, and then you can just ship 3.1 to your users, right? Like we might have figured this problem out before all of our users fell on their face. And similarly with all the other repos, it would be good to have someone in Gentoo who knows, like, this is where I can get the answers. And if we get reports of problems with the Gentoo eBuild, we know who to kind of call in on that ticket and say, that's not a TaskWarrior issue, but I know who you can talk to. That was a long way of saying we should talk to our downstreams. And just, I think maybe a separate job, but release management in general, just having a person who's kind of responsible for knowing when we make a release, getting some amount of testing in that release, gathering feedback on that, doing the actual writing the release text. I got pretty lazy about writing the cool descriptions that Tomas wrote some cool ones for 2.6 releases. So having someone do that can kind of second guess the work that the rest of us have done in terms of building that software. Again, might have helped with kind of the issues we ran into with 3.0, because I was tired. I wanted this out the door. And if someone else was kind of less tired and more keen on, like, let's make sure this is good, some of the issues in 3.0 and 3.1, 3.01 and 3.02 would have gotten caught. So that can be a nice kind of way to cooperate. Hello, Tomas. How are you?
Doing well, assuming I just wake up. Yes.
Yeah, same. So we've sort of all introduced ourselves. So maybe you can do a little bit about yourself, and then I did a brief description of like where Task Champion came from and kind of the history. And now we're just answering questions. So if you want to give you a little bit of background on yourself for the rest of us.
Sure thing. Yeah. So nice to meet you all. My name is Thomas. I joined TaskWarrior project back in 2014, I believe was my first commit as just a user who wanted to contribute a bit to the project. I've been contributing on and off, or more or less since that time period. Less in recent history, but yeah, still very much, I guess, emotionally interested in the project or invested in its future. Yeah, and that's why I am here, basically, try to make sure that we successfully continue the project, and I'm actually really happy with the turnout. Honestly, it's amazing to see all the new faces. So welcome all.
Thanks. I think the third one that's coming out of the list I'm looking at is issue triage, and just kind of being active on the issue tracker. That spans all the way from just sort of answering issues quickly. And for example, I don't know much about hooks, so when people file a bug about hooks, if I broke it, I can probably figure it out. But if it's just a question of like, how do I do this with a hook, or why is this hook thing that's unrelated to Task Champion not working? I'm like, hey, good luck. I just don't have time to learn that. So other people who are users who sort of know how TaskWarrior works would be good to get involved there. But that scales all the way up to how can we manage a couple hundred open issues in a way that we're not missing important stuff and we're not distracted by unimportant stuff. And I don't really know, there's a bunch of tools in GitHub we could use for that. At some point, we should figure out how we want to organize that, and then just kind of make sure everyone's focused that way. It would be useful. I think that's the three I can think of right now. I'm sure there's more ways.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Like, we were using some sort of a label system a couple of years ago. I even like did a really huge, like a sweep of all the open issues and try to make sure that everything that is open is actually actionable. One thing to keep in mind is that basically TaskWarrior until maybe 2018 was tracking everything in Jira, and then I migrated all the issues from Jira here. Some of the issues are old as a result. That means that they might just not be applicable anymore. And a lot of the open issues actually are not really bugs, but somewhat non-actionable suggestions until a decision is made that that particular feature wants to be implemented, or we want to move in that particular direction. Recently, I proposed that we maybe move those issues to the discussions, as that's a relatively new place where people can also discuss, and only create issues once somehow we have decided to, implement that particular direction. Not to gate anyone from contributing or anything. It's just I don't know. It was one of the ideas that I had, how to deal with the immense pressure of never decreasing list of issues to work on, which I would argue also causes some I guess paralysis in terms of contributing, right? Because there's like so many things that people could work on. Another way how we could achieve that would be just some sort of a good old issue prioritization, having some sort of milestones, or you would think put issues that belong to the next release or something. That's also something that someone could be helping with. Yeah, but other than that, I saw like Dustin put something as a good first issue recently. I think it was the removal of F4. That's another way how we could help people, contributing.
And I've had a lot of success. I've worked on a number of open source projects. I was at Mozilla before this, and I've had a really good success with getting people involved in projects with good first issues. Several of you have sort of started on those and then moved on to good second issues and things like that. And I think that's a nice way to get kind of more people invested in something. And now that we have 2 languages you can use, if you want to do actual development, that's great. But there's also work to do. Certainly documentation could use some work here. And to pivot a little bit, there's an RFC system that sort of exists, but the process is kind of not very, there's not a whole lot to the process. There are just some RFCs and seems to be a thing that was done. So that might be something where people could contribute, and also something that we could decide to invest in a little bit more as a process, and maybe a way to get some of these things from discussion of, I'd like to do this with TaskWarrior, to issues to implement it. Maybe the in-between part is an RFC, and that might be something where people less versed in actual writing C++, but who are familiar with software development, maybe know a different language, could do a design for TaskWarrior, sort of understanding how things fit together, and talk about this is the way we could do recurrence or different date handling or something like that. And then people who know the specific languages that would get implemented in could make the issues, make the pull requests, and get that implemented. On the other hand, I don't want to introduce artificial process for RFCs if we don't kind of have the human resources to handle that, because I think maybe there's a lot of RFCs out there that are like, we're doing this year, and it was written in 2016. And there's been a couple users on the discussions that have been disappointed that 3.0 didn't have the things that were promised in 3.0 several years ago, because work kind of stalled on that. So I think there's a possibility of building big processes and acting like we can really get a lot done that makes a promise, an implicit promise to people, and then you disappoint them if you don't follow through on that.
Yeah, I wanted to chime in on kind of what both you were saying. Before Thomas entered the room, Dustin said he doesn't really know what the Gothenburg Bit Factory is. And so we kind of have this range of, really formal processes to really informal processes. And I feel like we need to aim for a middle ground here. Like, we have this existing RFC thing that we don't really use. I think the pull request template was a good example that we just got rid of. A little bit of formalism that we were kind of ignoring. And I feel like we need to be a little bit more formal than we're being in practice. We need to be a little more formal, but not go too far, not go all the way back to where we were. And one of the things I had in mind regarding that is, I think it might be helpful to create at least a document documenting what the Gothenburg Bit Factory is, who's a member, maybe what each privilege that each person who's a member has. For example, I'm technically a member of the GitHub organization, and I can review pull requests. I think that's, and I guess I'm the maintainer of Bug Warrior. But yeah, having a main page that sort of describes what everyone's role is, I think might be helpful in that.
Yeah, so maybe some thoughts, not really answers from my side on the last 2 topics. So maybe one thing about the hooks. One thing I see when working with the hooks is also that sometimes all those wishes that come along with them somehow contradict. So the one person wants to have the hook to implement, especially with the TimeWarrior hook. I want all the projects to be converted to tags, but maybe split. And the other said, no, I want them converted but not split. And I recently got one wish that, could you please exclude the project? So this is somehow for me very difficult to balance, and to find out, okay, what should I do here and how to decide, and can we make it flexible enough, or do we have to split the hook system so we have one Time Warrior hook who does A and the other one who does B. So this complicates everything, and also from my side also well, makes it hard to concentrate on maybe the Time Warrior itself. So my contribution here was to extract the hook into a separate repository, to also have it more or less automatically tested against the recent versions of Time Warrior and TaskWarrior, so we do not have to worry or get a better picture how does a change in the Python script code from the hook affect all these repositories. But yeah, in a way, I would be happy to if somebody could somehow take over here, who's also more interested in both worlds from that. And maybe the second thing, what is the Gothenburg Bit Factory? When Tomasz now joined in and told about himself, it came to me, oh, shoot, I was wrong about my history here. I didn't join 2009. It was actually 2017, so sorry about that. So I came in later. And, well, I got to know it was one, I think, recently before 2016 when one guy from the first crowd of TaskWarrior developers, or the group around that, made a talk about TaskWarrior at my company, and it got me somehow hooked on this tool, and especially when he mentioned Time Warrior, because it was something I was looking for at that time. And then I got to know the people. Also, Tomasz was already there. And that was also then Paul Beckingham, Dirk Daimke, Sujevan, and some other. And, well, I think there was one meeting at the FOSDEM, and then came 2019, 20, and Corona. And more or less from there, the group somehow dissolved. So I think it was the first or the second meeting when I attended, when they had this renaming to from Task Tools, or from the TaskWarrior group to the Gothenburg Bit Factory. I think Paul Beckingham came up with the name, and yeah, I think Freddie, one of our members, is also from Stockholm, so that's the only connection we have to Sweden. That's. And I don't know. I guess Paul came up with the name somehow. I don't know why it got stuck, and then we just ran with that. Correct me, Tomasz, if I'm wrong, but that's how I remember the story. And yeah, so what is the Gothenburg Bit Factory? Well, in a way, it's the organization on GitHub currently, somehow. But from my side, it's in a way just me, Tomasz, and Federico Hernandez. That's the guy from Sweden. Because that's what I remember as the people I have met when I joined the project, and that more or less are now left over because all the other people went their own ways. So Dirk Daimke left some years ago. Sujivan also has not really been contributing from codes or other things. He also went his own ways. And well, so currently I'm also somehow looking for, well, trying to revive it, and or also find out what is the Gothenburg Bit Factory. So maybe we also need to restructure the it sounds maybe stupid with the membership in here, trying to get new members, promoting active members to their roles, find new roles for other people. As said, I would be happy to have some help with the web pages and all other stuff, so also that I can concentrate a bit more on Time Warrior and things than here. Okay, I think that was a lot thoughts dump from my side. Maybe somebody else wants to talk now.
Yeah, I could just provide more color there, perhaps a historical viewpoint. My understanding is that the project group was always called Gothenburg Bit Factory from the very beginning, or like very early on. Task Tools, I think it was like an additional domain that was used for like CI. And I think this, like, the story of the project is just a very classic open source story, which is it had a primary contributor who was Paul, and it's a story of burnout, where basically after some time, Paul was doing a really good job of like keeping the vision of the project kind of tight. I think that's going to be a challenge going forward, kind of like, accepting features and suggestions, but also knowing when to reject. That's a very difficult part in open source in order to make sure that the tools that you're building don't become I guess operating systems of their own. I don't know, Intel Max users or anything, but just it can go in that direction, right? Because people have different use cases, and kind of keeping the taste is difficult. But I just think Paul basically burned out after a decade of working on the project, and it was preceded, I think, by actually Federico being less available and blocking some of the effort. Sometimes some of the releases wouldn't happen on time because he was the one doing the release process. And back in the day, like, a lot of the things were basically kind of like self-hosted or self-made. Like the CI, there was actually a whole system for CI that was home built for the initiative. Web pages were not hosted on GitHub. Even right now, I think they are actually just HTML sites that are now on GitHub. And it was a big part of 2017, 2018 was I was trying to push the group to adopt GitHub more and migrate everything so we could get more user contributions and more easily involve the community. So I think a big theme going forward should be how do we make this less. The project should. I'm not saying that we shouldn't have people help, but because I'm trying to say that we should try to make the project as least maintenance burden as we can in terms of like all the gates that one has to cross to continue developing. And I guess in that sense, I would say hats off to Dustin. He had the courage pulled off the release, even though he didn't know exactly what's going to happen, and took that responsibility. We need more of that because otherwise you can have a lot of barriers in place, and then projects don't move along as much as they could. There's cost to everything, but the alternative is basically projects stalling, and I think that's something that we have to still work on. Like, it would be great to convert the websites to Markdown, for example, and have a static builder instead of having to edit HTML web pages. There's just some...
so sorry, we're already on Hugo.
Really is that? Man, okay.
So at least with the web pages, we're a bit ahead on the automation. There's still a lot to do, but yeah, they're all converted to Hugo now, at least for TaskWarrior and TimeWarrior and Holy Data. Okay. And also the Gospel BigFatry, that's done. So
it just took us so long to merge that. I thought that we never merged it. It was like 3 years to merge a pull request, and I had to chase that. Okay, anyway.
I just discovered that the organization web page repository, so there's Gothenburg BitFactory GitHub IO repository. I think this is still on the old state. But actually, the web pages itself, that's all based on Hugo. So
yeah. Okay, so there's a couple of web pages that we took on, but I guess you're right.
It took some time to do that. That's actually true.
Yeah, I remember. The Sui one was working on that, I think. And then you finished it, Thomas. Is that right?
More or less, yeah. I've completed what Sujivan more or less. Well, he was quite done, but cleaning up the rest of the pages, and I'm not quite sure whether Dustin also did some.
I was involved somehow.
Dusting off. Sorry, but yeah,
Yeah.
There was we started it long time ago, and then it somehow stalled, and then more or less we actually finished it.
Yeah. And well, last time I thought maybe this call is going to be replaced for that, but when things were working more smoothly, which I would say like was 2018, a big factor was like people meeting in person was a big boost to plans, projects, and everything. Yeah. So always happy to be involved in that. And I guess it's very hard for a global team if this becomes a global team. Just throwing my 2 cents, that was something that I really enjoyed back in the day.
And I think that's the experience that I've had trying to keep teams trying to get project continuity goes in two directions. And one of them is what you just said, that having kind of a social glue really helps a lot. Where, if we're meeting every 2 weeks or every month or whatever it is, and we're seeing faces, and one of us starts to get burned out, we can help each other. Or if one of us is just like, I don't want to do this anymore, let's imagine I decide I don't want to do this anymore. Instead of just disappearing, I'll come to this meeting and say, hey, y'all that I've been talking to every week or every month, I don't want to do this anymore. How can we get me out of this? And then we can come up with a strategy for that as a whole. The other kind of more technical solution is there's a bunch of umbrella organizations out there that have kind of systems in place for deciding who is on a project management committee, and then they make sure that you get new people if some of those people drop off. So Software Freedom Conservancy is one that we did with BuildBot. There's a couple others: Apache Software Foundation, Free Software Foundation, probably more that I don't know about now. So we could think about signing up for one of those. This is probably something we should come back to as a topic and see what sounds beneficial, where do we need help, where are we doing well, and kind of work around there. But I think it's an important question to answer, and maybe we can work on that as Gutenberg Bit Factory as a whole, and make sure that Holly Data and all the other projects under there also have a continuity plan in place if the people working on them want to move on. I think that would be great. I love the transcription of Holly Data as Holly Data, HOLLY, like the plant. I don't know if you all are seeing the closed captions.
I really just want to agree with what Dustin's saying there. I feel like on the TaskWarrior side, it's not clear to me that we really made an improvement over what we've had in the past, with one maintainer doing everything, and everybody's bus comes, right? I mean, everyone's going to burn out eventually, and that continuity plan is what I want to see. And I'm thinking the same thing in terms of BugWarrior. I don't want to work on that forever, probably. And that's one of the reasons I was excited about moving from Ralph's namespace into the Gothenburg Bit Factory, because I hoped there'd be a continuity plan, when I disappear, which I will. I don't know when, but I will. And I don't see that yet. So yeah, I'm excited about the things Dustin's talking about, with just a little more formality around who's in control and who can grant authority to people. When I disappear, who does someone ask for the authority to merge stuff into BugWarrior? And that's the question that I kind of want to be just a little more recorded and formalized, so that, like Dustin, I don't want to feel trapped, but I also don't want my work to die as soon as I disappear. Right, and it seems like, my impression right now is that Thomas Babe, I'm sorry if I'm saying that wrong, is the only one with all the authority. And I could be wrong about that, but again, formalizing that and just letting people know what the situation is would be nice.
As a point of order, I don't want to say there's other exit strategies than burnout. Hopefully we're not all going to burn out someday. Hopefully some of us will be lucky enough to.
Yeah, one thing that comes to mind for me is Tomas's point about the help on the website. So just to give a little bit of background on myself, I recently started getting into software development. I have something on the order of like between 4 and 6 months of skill. That's why when you saw my my initial contribution here, it was on a relatively straightforward pull request. I was renaming some files. Basically, the test files needed to be renamed to reflect what kind of script it was: Python, C++, shell script, etc. So when you, Tomas, noted that there's some work to be done on the TaskWarrior website, my ears perked up, and I planned on, if not raising that issue during this meeting, reaching out to you after the meeting and asking for like what needs to be done there. So I'm interested in that. And just to give a little bit more background, I'm well versed is probably not it, but I have some capacity in web frameworks. Like, I know a bit of React, I know some Express, and I know JavaScript and Python. So that's how I can contribute here.
Yeah, and if I could just give a little bit of feedback as an outsider, the stuff you're talking about now, that is something that was kind of daunting for me, not understanding the project, not understanding what was going on. So it's good to see that you really see that, because I was looking at, I have a itch that I wanted to scratch, a problem, and I was trying to look around for how to fix that problem, and I was looking at issues, and I'm like, well, it's not an issue, it's a feature request. If I was going to do anything, I'd try to work around it. I hate the way the IDs are created, because I'm always typing in 3-digit numbers. I was wondering, is there a workaround where I could change it so that the newest ones I do are at the top of the list rather than being at the bottom of the list? Because I'm always working on new ones, but I've got a lot of someday maybes, and I've got a lot of waiting, and so those take up the first 200, 20, 30 of them, and I got 135. But it wasn't, and I was like, man, I'd like to help, but I'm not sure how to get started. I don't want to bug those guys because I know they're busy and they're not real people. But then coming to see you here, I'm like, oh, wait a minute, they are real people, and they would like some help. So I'd love to help, but how would I get started on, I don't want to bug somebody who's the wrong person, who might not be and there's always when you pull somebody on new, they can be helpful, but usually they're not helpful for about 6 months, and you got to kind of train them up to where things are, who the right person to talk to, how the process works. And so how would somebody do that?
How would someone come up to speed on working on the code base?
Well, just get started with, communicating with you guys so that you're not, you don't want to be a drag. Hey, what about, let me ask this question. Let me ask this question. But also you want to make sure that you're, you get some information so you're not making changes that aren't any good. Should I just do, make some changes and put up a pull request? Not knowing how it fits in. You see what I'm saying? You don't want to do a pull request and say, here's what I'd like you to do, and then it doesn't fit in with what you're doing. It's like, yeah, we thought about that. We don't want to do that because of this reason. I'm like, oh, okay. That's kind of what I was thinking.
That's a really good, deep open source question. And different open source communities have different answers to that question, and different open source communities have different ways to find the answers to those questions. And I've certainly struggled with that here, because sometimes you put up a pull request and nothing happens for a month, and you're like, is it bad? Has nobody looked at it? Should I ask someone to look at it? Who should I ask to look at it? Right. So I don't have an answer to it, but it is a very good question.
Yeah, so I'm glad you guys have seen that issue.
I think at the current level of activity, any of the options is a good one. Open an issue, open a discussion, open a pull request. I mean, we're not overwhelmed at the moment. So yeah, I don't see a need for quite as much formality as, requiring everything to be a discussion before it becomes an issue. I think that I like the idea in general, but I don't think it matches the way people are used to using GitHub right now. And I think it's kind of fine whatever people do. We need it all. We need as much feedback as we can get, because obviously I think the 3.0 release really let us know hey, we're not getting enough feedback. in this repository. Yeah, that's.
I know we're sort of running out of time, but so maybe just as something to think about, some good books on this topic that cover some of the questions that have come up. This is one of them by Carl Fogel. He's working on a second edition, but has been for a few years. But this one's very good. And also, I remember less of this, so maybe it was less useful, but Open Device by Lydia Pincher. But like people have written books and thought pretty hard about trying to get the lay of the land on how these things are done. So maybe those are something to review if those are interesting questions to you.
Excellent. And I want to reiterate, I love what you guys have done. It really is a good product. I found context just yesterday, and I was working, when I was trying to find the answer to that question that I'm trying to work around, I found context. I'm like, oh man, this will solve some other problems and it did. It was really good. So thanks for all you guys do.
Also, just to illustrate your question, Ed, I started working on Chromium about a year ago. And it was really interesting. I had the same questions about Chromium, like this code base is baffling. Where do I start? How do, should I make a CL, a PR, and put it out there and it's terrible and they fix it in review, or it's the expectation that I kind of make something that's good and then get review on it. And it took me a long time to figure out that like nobody writes anything down. You have to know who to ask. And it's okay to ask someone who you should ask about something and then go talk to that person. But that's a really unusual way to structure a huge open source project like Chromium, to have specific people that know the things you need to know. So it took me a while to figure that out. And it just takes a while, I think, with every new project you run across to kind of figure out the social dynamics there. So we could do a better job of onboarding people to that and say, like, if you want to get started with development, here's where to go. Maybe here's the chat channel. We can decide if we want to use Discord for that. And here's some people that can help you on Discord. Maybe not. I don't know. I'm not saying we should do that, but we should have a thing there that people can sort of come to and say, okay, I can follow these steps and get started, and maybe I'll need to get to know some people, or maybe I'll just make a PR and that'll be good. Whatever we decide, we should make it clear to newcomers, because we want newcomers. That's how you keep a project alive.
Awesome.
I'll just point out that when I was making that first PR, I did feel welcomed by both Felix, Ryan, and eventually you, Dustin, when putting that together. So for what it's worth, like that was my perception of that. So thank you.
Yeah, I get that same perception here. That's not, when you look online, you're not sure. You guys have done such fantastic work. You're like, oh, these guys are Superman. I don't want to bug them. They're probably busy as heck. And then you kind of sit in a meeting like this, and you guys are real. You are normal people. So I'll start digging in a little bit, but I just didn't. I just wanted to. Really, I wanted to come here and thank you guys for all the work you did. So.
Oh, that's a good point.
I second that. So I really think the idea to have these, or to get started with regular meetings, would really help the project or the projects here in the Gothenburg Dictionary. I think that there was something that was lacking over the last years, mainly due to Corona, where nobody don't meet in person. But I think even before, when we had this annual meeting at FOSDEM, somehow unofficially, having more meetings or just to see somebody in person really helps a lot just to, well, even if you just say hello, how are you doing, how's the weather, and nothing else, well, it makes a difference, I guess. So in a way, a big thank you from my side to you, Wesley, to get this started or on board, and also to you, Dustin. The same here. Yeah, so I think it's a good start here, what we're doing right now, talking to each other.
One thing that came to mind as like another role as a result of the discussion was that a lot of the issues actually are just like can be resolved by working with the user and either helping them realize that there is a feature that can accomplish what they are trying to achieve, or some of the issues are just pure. There's something not configured correctly in the tool. So it's actually like a non-trivial amount of user support on the project. And for a while, I tried to meticulously reply to every single person who did that. I don't know how long I lasted. That wasn't more than a couple of months. Yeah, I think we should try to distribute that. There was a support email for some time. I think we should just retire that and just use something that is more easily parallelizable by multiple people, so that people can help with that. So that's another thing that I would highlight as a potential way of helping. And add to your point about how do you approach these kinds of things? Look, you should always feel free to express your ideas, and you can always buy goodwill in the project by doing some of these things. Not all of them require technical contributions. I'm not sure. Didn't get to hear your guys' intro, so I don't know if you are a technical contributor. But the context feature that you actually mentioned happened exactly that way. I liked the idea, I wanted to implement it, but it wouldn't have happened because Paul didn't like it. He didn't like the feature, but I had to basically buy goodwill through other contributions into the project, and that way I managed to get that in. So reverse IDs, I think, not a bad idea necessarily. I think I might have even looked at that issue at some point, but I don't think we had a pull request or implementation at any given point.
Thanks,
Do you
all.
need to run off? I'm supposed to go do some planting. I do a lot of plants, obviously, so another duty calls there. But it has been really nice to meet you all, and I look forward to the next time this happens. So, but please do stay around and chat. I'm not the focus, guys.